Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. I'm Fox, and today I wanted to introduce to you all a brand new series with the best PvP builds for TU12 and 12.1. This series will be updated as time goes on, as we now know that the Division series is being supported for at least another year, and I expect the sandbox will change in that window, so as time goes on I will update it. But this series to start with will be a collection of 3 videos. Today's video will be tanks. The next video will be DPS roles, and the third and final will be healer/support roles. The aim of this series, of course, is to give everybody out there, all you guys and gals, the best information needed to get into PvP in the Dark Zone and in Conflict, and have the best possible team synergy and experience with a group of your friends and clanmates. Before we get into the 3 builds that I'll be showcasing today, 3 tank builds, I do just want to thank everybody for the continued support of the channel and for allowing me to hit 8,000 subscribers in less than a year, which is fantastic growth. If you do genuinely like the content, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you go into the description below, apart from the timestamps for the 3 builds, you will also notice our Discord link there as well. That's been fantastically set up by my friend Lugton, who will give you a hand in setting yours up as well. All his contact details are there. But if you're looking to maybe group up with players a bit more often, we do have LFG sections for all 3 platforms, PC, PlayStation, Xbox. You can get raids together using our event planner, which we've already done one of already. DZ groups, PvP groups, there are build discussion groups. I'll be notifying in the Discord server of when a video is coming out, so you'll have a bit of a heads up on that as well. Lots of reasons to join. So get in the Discord, hit that like and subscribe, and of course a notification bell icon to be notified of my future videos. Right then, let's get started. So 3 tank builds today. Let's load into the first one. Tank build number 1 are my personal favourite. This is a survivalist perfect efficient build, which is meta at the moment, but we're also utilising True Patriot, Coyotes and a few skills to offer a number of benefits. To summarise this build, we're offering huge additional team damage, vast amounts of team healing, and the ability to counter status effects all in one role. This build literally ticks all the boxes for me, is great fun to use, and True Patriot is a fantastic set to run in your tank build at the moment. Apart from Hunter's Fury, True Patriot is one of the best sets to run in the Dark Zone and in Conflict. So what we'll do in the standard format of my videos is go through the build from top to bottom, starting with the specialization, finishing on the skills. We'll then look at the stats. I'll then move into the final 2 tank builds. So we are using Survivalist for the obvious reason of the armor kit with Perfectly Efficient, but just to go into a bit of detail there, the armor kit heals 100% of your total armor, which in this case is 1.6 million with the 5 blues, and it applies that same heal to anybody on your team within a 20-meter radius. If you are not rogue and you are fighting rogues with other random players that are not on your team, it even applies to them, as they are classed as being shade agents like yourself, and the game categorizes them as an ally. I'm not too sure, this doesn't work with separate rogue groups, not that people should be multi-grouping anyway. So what this essentially does is offer a vast heal, technically an overheal, as it's taking your armor pool and applying it to even people that have a lower amount of blues. What it also does is give your teammates, not yourself mind, but your teammates 10% additional damage to any enemy that is status affected from any source. That can come from the incendiary grenades. In the Dark Zone you'll have 7 of these, so more than the usual amount. You can just throw these in chokes, and if that enemy is burning, they can't shoot at you. It will do no damage, but it does mean that your team will deal 10% additional damage to that player. You can also get this from your teammates' own status abilities as well. The weapons that you use on this build are really up to you. You do I don't want to say a small amount of damage with this build because True Patriot really enhances it, but you want to use an AR predominantly because you want to be at a reasonable range for Coyotes, and then a short range weapon for your secondary. We're not using a shield here, so InSync is a bad choice. My talents of choice in this build, the first and foremost would be Strained. If you've got a good slow rate of fire weapon with Strained, because True Patriot enhances the mag size by 30%, this means that you're firing for longer, and therefore Strained is putting in more work. But I also really like Measured, Optimist and Ranger. So Strained is your top choice, and then I'd probably say the other 3 as a second choice. I don't know why I haven't got it rolled onto this carbine, but that's absolutely fine. The Vector is my secondary choice with Optimist. This is one of the best secondary weapons in the game, as you can just quickly swap to it in the heat of a fight. You haven't got to worry about proccing any talent like InSync. You can just fire it at 1200 RPM to really capitalise on what Optimist can offer. And then we're finally using the Orbit. Again, you won't use your Orbit on this build, but ultimately it is the best PvP pistol in the game for the finisher talent. Whether you use Perfect Finisher or Standard Finisher on a different pistol, it doesn't really make that much difference. So let's come down to the build itself. We are using Coyotes. Now this is a fantastic way to buff your own damage and everybody else's damage. You need to be getting at least 1 Coyotes in your 3 to 4 man group. It is super important as it is just a free damage increase for everybody involved. We're going to be using the top 2 here, so the close range one will give everybody 25% critical hit damage, which is insane. That's a vast amount of additional damage, particularly if they're already at the 60% chance cap. And if they are at range, which is where I always start firing to start that True Patriot debuff, 15 to 25 meters gives us, and everybody else, 10% critical hit chance and 10% critical hit damage. That is why with this build you need to be running it to 50% crit chance. Because, you know, ultimately you can still benefit from both the close and mid-range Coyotes benefit. I would say the centerpiece of this build, along with Survivalist, is the Everyday Carrier. As stated earlier, this is absolutely meta for tanks at the moment, as if we just switch it to the PvP variant, what this essentially does is boost the specialization armor kit bonuses by 50%. So this now means that 150% of our armor, which is 2.4 million, will be applied to everybody in your team that is within 20 meters of you. So this is an insane overhill. Yes, it's over 5 seconds, so that is essentially 20% of that 2.4 million, you know, every 1 second. But it is an insane overhill, and this just means that your teammates can get in the fight. As soon as you've called out that you popped your armor kit, they can get in the fight, and they are incredibly difficult to break down. If you ever come into the Dark Zone, you notice that you're getting damage numbers, but people's health isn't going down. It's because they're running Survivalist Perfect Efficient. It is too good to ignore at the moment. On top of that, we gain a 75% chance to not even use the armor kit. My all-time record with this is 17 armor kits in a row before I ran out, and of course dying will refresh it back up to the 4 or the 2 in conflict. So you can just pop these over and over and over, and your team can just go ham and not have to worry about going down. It is just god tier. You want to roll this to crit chance and crit damage, as it is important to get some damage on this build, and you want to be at that 50% crit chance mark. We are then running 4-piece True Patriot, so didn't mean to go into that. So the 2-piece gives us 30% ammo capacity, which lends itself towards not running out of ammo quite as quick with this build as you might with another build. 30% magazine size, which is why Strained is so powerful. You can see my carbide has gone up from 50 bullets to 65, which is fantastic. But most importantly, the red, white and blue buff. Every 2 seconds when we shoot an enemy, it will apply one of those 3 colours based on which one it is rotated around, which it does so every 2 seconds. Red amplifies the damage that that enemy takes by 8% from any source, be it skills, status, weapons, anything. It's really powerful. White means that anybody that is shooting into that enemy will gain 2% armor regen per second, which is again fantastic. And yes, this has been patched so that it now works with anybody. And finally, blue decreases the damage that enemy can deal to us by 8% as well. So this is a crazy amount of buffs and debuffs that really bring out the support part of this support tank's capabilities. On top of all of that, if we get the full flag bonus, so that is if we get all 3 colours on one enemy over that 6-second window, and it does last for 20 seconds by the way, when they die they create an incredibly powerful explosion. I've seen some crazy team wipes where everybody's been a little bit low and then we just managed to get the kill on one of them and they'll just kill like 2, 3, 4 other people in their team. It's fantastic, and yeah, it just works great for controlling the flow of a fight. What we are doing is running the backpack, which is very important as it takes all of those buffs and enhances them quite dramatically. The red and blue go up from 8% to 12%, so that's 12% amplified damage versus anybody that has red on them now, and the white goes up to 3%. If somebody's already got, say, a Ridgeways build on where they're going to get 3% from shooting an enemy, and that enemy also has the white flag, they've got 6% armor regen in a fight, and that's not even factoring in the perfectly efficient survivalist medkit. You can see what I'm saying when, you know, this build just keeps everybody alive and enhances their damage to insane levels. Every piece of your True Patriot needs to be rolled to crit chance until you hit 50%. So I've got crit chance on the back, crit chance on the gloves. I actually hit the cap by this point as I had crit chance on the holster, so I then went crit damage on the knees. But ultimately, you want to be at that 50%, so just remember that. We're not using in sync or anything like that here, as shield takes away from this build. So what we do want to use is the booster hive and the jammer pulse. It is quite common for teams that are maybe being beat a little bit by your own team to switch to status, as it is quite a low skill loadout that can achieve a lot of kills, which is why a lot of people are using it. And until it is nerfed, it is going to be very prominent in the game. So the way that we are countering that amongst everything else that we're already doing on this build is to run a booster hive to cleanse all status effects and improve the weapon handling of our team in conjunction with the jammer pulse to break down any status based skills. So the way that you would usually do it, you'll see a team, an enemy team, throw in a tier 6 Stinger Hive, which is incredibly common, unfortunately. Yes, they do tons of damage as well. What you're going to do is pop that immediately with your jammer. You're then going to drop the booster hive to cleanse your team. Because you've taken a bit of damage at this point, as you want to be within range of these hives, that is your job to take damage from them. You're then going to quickly get into cover once those skills have been destroyed to pop your armor kit, and this means that all of a sudden your team have no status, they have an additional 20% weapon handling, and they have a 2.4 million armor coming in over the next 5 seconds. So what you've essentially done is completely taken what could be a disadvantage, fighting a status guy, and turned it on its head to become an advantage, because that status can keep giving you the ability to take damage and reproc that perfectly efficient survivalist kit. My stats on this build are 50% crit chance. As I stated, it's very important to hit this value, but no higher. 121.3% crit damage. Everything else is just based on a max watch. The armor you can see is at 1.64 million. We do have a bit of armor regen from the 1% Bellstone, the everyday carrier, and then everything else is just based on a max watch level. So a lot of the benefits of this build do come from shooting into enemies with everything that we've got here with coyotes and TP, but ultimately it does put in a lot of work. So that is the first of the 3 tank builds, and my personal favourite for just everything that it can do with one build. We're now going to move on to a damaging tardigrade tank build. Okay, so we are now on tank 2. This is a damaging tardigrade build. The whole purpose of this build is to be very up close and personal with the enemy opposition, to take more damage away from your team and onto you, to provide tardigrade procs to everybody, and to have a large amount of personal damage by being within that close range fight. We are achieving this via the Firewall Talent and Lady Death, as well as a lot of crit chance and crit damage rolled onto this build with the high armor regen in conjunction with the bonus armor that we can provide every 45 seconds to ourselves and everybody with tardigrade. Let's start at the top. Firewall gives us a very powerful armor kit, the best in the game for PvP, as it is 200% armor and health returned to you over a 10-second window when you pop this, and it synergizes very well with the armor regen, the high blue, and the fact that you need to be right in the thick of the fight. It's just one more way to stay alive for longer, and it works amazingly. It also gives everybody else in your team, so not yourself, 10% additional damage, just like the survivalist specialization, but this time it is 10% to any enemy that is within 10 meters of yourself. So once again lending to you being right in the front of the fight. On top of that, we also gain a very powerful cluster grenade that is great for killing people that we have downed or anybody is downed. And it gives us finally the Striker Shield, which is another way to stay alive for longer, to keep our vigilance active for longer, and to give ourselves further damage with the damage bonus that comes only from the shield. Vigilance on the backpack is up for discussion, by the way. That's my personal choice. There are some other options that I will go through. Lady Death is of course best in slot for any close range build. Shotgun works really well as well, but you want to make sure you're hitting 60% on a shotgun, and that's hard to do with this build. What isn't hard to do is hit the chance cap with a Lady Death. Of course SMGs come with 21% max crit chance intrinsically. What Lady Death does is give us an amplified damage talent, which pairs very well with vigilance, and it just works anyway because it's 60% amplified damage. So for a build that is predominantly there to be a tank, this just means that you can really contribute to the damage in your team. A fantastic weapon to use. I appreciate a lot of people love it, a lot of people hate it, but the whole point of this video is to give you guys, well researched meta builds that can really compete in the TU12 sandbox, and Lady Death is obviously going to rear its ugly face. Second weapon, as I state in all my videos, you want a long range weapon if you're maining a short range and vice versa. So I've just gone for the Shield Splinter here. It doesn't really make a difference. You could use any AR that you were comfortable using, is whatever you are comfortable with. Moving down to the build itself, we are looking at a lot of armor regen here. So we're going to use 2-piece Golan. 1 piece only gives us a 10% status effects, which isn't very useful, but the 2-piece does give us the 1%, which is very useful. So yeah, don't worry too much about the 2-piece there. Every single armor piece that you want on this build needs to look as close to what you can see here as possible. High armor, high crit chance, high crit damage. They are the 3 most important stats on this build so that we can actually contribute effectively to the fight, instead of just being a big meat shield that occasionally gives people some blue armor. The second piece of Golan is rolled in exactly the same way, so again you can see this is the theme of the build, and that gives us the 1% armor regen. We gain 2%, the additional 1% of course coming from this Bellstone backpack, once again rolled to armor, crit chance and crit dam. Now vigilance here is a little bit, I don't want to say off meta, but underrated. Vigilance is a very powerful multiplicative damage buff, one of the most powerful in the game in fact, but you do lose it the moment you take damage. by effectively using the 2 skills that we have selected on this build, you can keep this up for longer periods of time, meaning you are more likely to close kills. But I do appreciate the best in slot for a tank build is Adrenaline Rush, particularly on a 6 blue build. It offers no additional damage, but it does mean that you can stay alive for longer. So Adrenaline Rush is a fantastic choice. I would suggest that you look, if you want to go for more damage, you want to consider Perfectly Wicked, as that is Golan, and we have 2 Golans on the build, so we're actually utilising the build better. Not only that, you can then use an EMP jammer, which will proc you Perfectly Wicked, and of course Golan gives status effects as the one piece, so again you're taking more advantage of having 2 Golan, but I've just gone for Vigilance in this instance. So they're the 3 you want to look at: Vigilance, Wicked and Adrenaline Rush. Moving down to the knees, we are using the named Emperor's Guard Murakami knees that are a DZ exclusive. These are rolled to crit damage, which is perfect for this build as we've already easily hit the chance cap with all the chance we have, and Lady Death being an SMG. If you don't have a good pair of these, don't worry about it, get it on your build anyway. If you've got a pair that just sat there with, I don't know, health or repair skills, roll it to blue, slap it on your build. I know that seems like bad advice, but this build first and foremost is a tank, a 6 blue tank to provide tardigrade. That is its main purpose. So if you've got a bit of a poorly rolled Emperor's Guard, just stick it on, and then by utilising the information you gain in these videos to put together an effective DZ team, you'll get another one in no time. Trust me, you get these from caches. If you play DZ daily, you'll get Murakami's Emperor's Guard more so than ever before. So yeah, if you've got crit chance and crit damage, perfect. If you haven't, still roll them to blue, get them on your build. If you don't have a single pair of these, I would recommend that you go with the 3rd Golan for the 5% total armor, or the 1-piece Gilla for the same thing, the 5% total armor, as this will enhance your tardigrade proc. The final piece that we have on the build to enhance our damage is a Sokolov, which gives us the 10% SMG damage. If you're struggling to hit the chance cap, you could go for Seska. You could potentially choose Grupo, although that does equate to less damage. Whatever you want here, but Sokolov is best in slot just to squeeze out that bit of extra damage, and we've already got everything else in the build giving us armor regen. So I've just rolled these to blue, which is very important, and once again kept the crit chance and crit damage on there. The centerpiece of the build is Tardigrade, as this gives us a 40% armor, bonus armor, to anybody on our team, ourselves included, when our main armor pool breaks, and this is a per ally cooldown of 45 seconds. This is amazing if you've got a Lady Death user in the team as well that is using Intimidate, as it will essentially completely turn that fight around for them. Where they would usually lose all of their armor and then die, they will now have 40% of your 1.8 million as bonus armor, which means they're Intimidate procs. And instead of them dying, they've got all that armor and all that damage, which means they can easily turn that fight in their favor, just simply by you existing, quite simply, with Tardigrade in your team. Very, very powerful, if not the most powerful tank talent in the game, outside of Perfectly Efficient. Once you have hit your crit chance cap, you can then just spec everything into crit damage. You see I've got crit damage mods on all 3 pieces here, but if you need to use crit chance, don't worry about it. Ultimately, the damage of this build is second to the high armor with the Tardigrade proc, so focus on that first and then move on to your 60% cap and everything else put into crit damage. The 2 skills that we are using enhance the vigilance side of this, but I still recommend using them anyway. We have a tier 6 striker shield, which gives us 13% additional damage, again helping to actually close kills ourselves, as you don't just want to be a dead weight in your team. And of course, with the shield active, your vigilance will stay active for longer versus players that have bad aim, as if they're not hitting your personal armor pool and are only hitting your shield, vigilance stays active for longer, meaning you're more likely to get the kill. We also use the decoy for the same reason. This puts the armor stat from above your head to above the decoy's head, so this has a tendency to cause your opposition to overstay their welcome in the fight, because they won't know that you've got 6 blue with a ton of armor regen, so they might think they're about to kill you, and you can just stay in that fight and yeah, just gun them down with your teammates. But not only that, if you put the decoy somewhere else, your teammates, or should I say the opposition, are more likely to go for people whose health and armor pools they can see, and this means that once again you might not be shot straight away, lending to that vigilance staying active for longer. But if you want to run an EMP jammer to go with Perfectly Wicked on your backpack, I would say that is as good as this build, potentially even better. I really like how vigilance works, as it is such a big damage buff. Looking at the stats of this build, you can see that our crit chance is indeed at the 60%, and we've been able to get our crit damage to 144%. Don't worry if you can't get this anywhere near as high as this. As long as that's at cap, and this is only 90, 100, you'll still be fine. Obviously more is better, but this is ultimately a tank build. If you go down to the tank stats, you can see my armor is over 1.8 million with nearly 60k armor regen per second. So you can just get your decoy down, you know, run around chicken dance to get your armor regen on the go. And yeah, it's quite hard for you to die on this build, particularly with that tardigrade proc to fall back on. Everything else is just based on having firewall as our specialization and a maxed out watch level. So that is tank build number 2. What we're now going to do is look at a anti-status version of this build as the third and final build in this video. Okay, so tank build number 3, this is still a high armor regen, high armor tardigrade build, but we are now utilizing high hazard protection, the galvanized talent and liberty to still achieve high damage whilst keeping our bulwark shield active, but most importantly not being subject to those pesky status users out there. I'm not going to go into too much detail on my opinion of status. I mean, I've mentioned my distaste for it before. I don't agree with how powerful it is in the game, particularly because it is incredibly easy to use. That is why it is everywhere, and a lot of the best players that I've seen in Conflict have actually left the game. Some of my teammates have left the game exclusively because of status. So in my opinion, it has ruined the face of PvP, but that is why this build exists. Mad OCFM, one of my lieutenants, he actually came up with this build, and I've showcased it in a previous video, but this definitely gets a mention because if you're coming up against status guys, this build is there to ruin their lives, and you know, let's face it, we're all going to get a bit of satisfaction from that. So once again, we'll start from the top, go down to the bottom of the skills, show the stats, and that'll then be the end of this video. We are running the Grenadier Demolitionist specialization because it gives us 20% burn resistance, which is exceptionally important in the TU12 status heavy meta. It gives us the ability to refill the magazine in our gun instantly if our armor gets low, but maybe most importantly, it actually gives 5% damage to targets out of cover to everybody on your team apart from yourself. I'm not sure if this is still bugged or not, but 5% damage to targets out of cover is multiplicative, and it's just more damage for your teammates. The two weapons that you use as your main and secondary are entirely your decision. You will not be using these that much at all. This is a Liberty build first and foremost, but you still want to be able to apply damage from distance where Liberty might not be so good. So I would recommend just using, same as before, Measured, Optimist, or Strained or Ranger for your assault rifle, and then the same for your SMG. Just, you know, depending on the rate of fire is what you'll go for. I've just got my standard carbine here and then a standard Vector here with Optimist and Measured on them. So these two, it really doesn't make a difference. This build will not hit very hard at all. This is purely here to counter status. What will hit hard, however, is your Liberty. So make sure you have pistol rolled onto Demolitionist at the bench inside the base of operations in Haven. Hits grant 2% weapon damage. This lasts indefinitely until you switch off of the weapon, so I usually just run around with this on my hand and don't even touch my other two. Headshots consume all stacks, repairing your shield for 3% per stack. So that's 90% shield repair if you land a headshot. But this thing packs a punch when you go for bodies and shields, so it's a fantastic weapon to run with the Bulwark. Looking at the pieces, it's very similar to before. We are going for the 2-piece Golan, 1-piece Bellstone, 1 Murakami Knees to get the 3% total armor regen. But what we're now doing is rolling every piece, the minor attributes, to Hasbro and to armor regen. This is to ensure that we can stay alive for much longer in a fight. This build is designed to literally face tank, but it's also designed to shut down those status users. So 2-piece Golan will give us the 1% armor regen and the status effects, which is very important for this build as we're using Riot Foam. Yes, I know I've just talked about my dislike for status, and now I'm literally using Riot Foam. I only use this build to counter status. If an enemy team decides that they want to throw on a cheesy build and try and status my team into the ground just because we're winning, then I will fight fire with fire. Or more specifically, I'll fight burn with ensnare. So the 2-piece Golan has more use on this build, but just make sure you have every piece rolled as close to what I have here as possible. You can see the second Golan is exactly the same. High armor regen, Hasbro. We've still got the Murakami Knees. Now I was lucky enough to get a max Hasbro build roll on this particular piece. Optimization makes this a lot easier now, but as I said before, if you've just got a pretty poorly rolled pair, get them on blue. Even if they've got something terrible as the minor attribute, it still works with this build. You will take a little bit more damage from status, but hardly any, so don't worry too much about it. It's still the best thing to have on this build. But if you can get a Hasbro pair, and you know, get that Hasbro optimized and roll it to blue, you'll be laughing. It just makes this build insane at that point. We have 1-piece Jarl for the 10% Hasbro, once again rolled in the same way to armor, Hasbro and armor regen. And then we're finishing on the Bellstone, which once again is rolled in those exact same 3 areas, but we now have galvanize on the backpack. Again, switching this to PvP, applying a blind, ensnare, confuse or shock to our enemy grants 20% of our armor as bonus armor to all allies within 20 meters of that enemy for 10 seconds. This is fantastic with Riot Foam because if you're coming up against a status heavy team that just choose to camp behind their status effects, you can get in there with the high Has Pro, you can go in with your Lady Death users or your AR users or whatever else is on your team, foam the status user to, teach them a little lesson, and then you'll give the people that are with you 20% of your 1.8 million, so that's 360k as bonus armor, which means they have even more health, even more intimidate proc, and you can just gun them down. It works incredibly well. If you're not a fan of the foam, you can just switch to gunner and use Banshee, but of course fire will hit you a little bit harder there as we're losing the 20% Has Pro, the burn Has Pro in particular. The skills that we are using are the Bulwark Shield, so once again as this build does no damage, the point of it is to take all of the status damage away from your team. So what you want to do is get in the fight. If your health starts to get low, you need to pop the Bulwark Shield and then start building up stacks on your Liberty pistol and then ultimately getting a headshot to repair your shield. All this time is spent in a fight, which means that the opposition are wasting resources on you, which means your teammate can capitalise on that and get in there and clean house. You're going to be not unkillable, but exceptionally hard to kill on this build. And the Riot Foam, or any chem launcher for that matter, actually works with a Bulwark Shield. You can pop the shield, press your right bumper or R1, and then you'll pull this straight out and then be able to apply the galvanised proc from your backpack. So these two work very well with each other, and yeah, just sort of applying all this additional bonus armor whilst being relatively resistant to hazard just makes this build ridiculous. What we'll now do is have a look at these stats. So all of our weapon-based stats are pretty low. There's no crit chance, no crit dam on this build, which is why the Liberty is such a good choice here. What is important, however, are the armor stats. So we've still got the same 1.8 million as we did before, but we now have is 77,000 armor regen per second, which is ridiculous. You can just, honestly, with the lack of how much status can do to you on this build, you can stay alive with that Bulwark Shield in particular for crazy amounts of time. You're going to be a real bully to any team that has the nerve to bring out status against you. We have 70% Has Pro, and that is of course with the Murakami knees being max roll, so don't worry if this goes down to 60. The bleed resistance is because we are using 3 bleed based mods. So what you want to do is get your bleed resistance, if you can, to over 95%, as this build will then directly counter Ridgeway's users with Perfectly Wicked and Sadist, as none of those things will work. They won't get the damage bonus from Wicked, they won't get the damage bonus from Sadist, and they won't get the armor regen from Ridgeway's, at least not versus you. So if you see a status guy or a Ridgeway's guy, you need to get those 3 bleed mods on to get over the 95% immune threshold and then get right in their face. Even if you're at 85%, don't worry about it, still play in the same way. You'll take a little bit of damage, and yes, you will still give them the Wicked proc, but the bleed is going to wear off so quickly that their Sadist and their armor regen will stop, and you're basically in the same place. Everything else is at 70% apart from Burn, which is at 90% because of Demolitionist, so you're not, I think it's 92% on Burn to be immune. It might be 95, I can't remember now. But ultimately, Burn will hit you a little bit, and we all know how easy it is to aim a Burn sticky bomb and just get a free kill. This is once again going to take that luxury away from anybody that wants to use status versus you. So you need to be in the front lines versus the Ridgeways and the status with this build. But these stats really help you to stay alive. Like it's actually crazy how easily you can stay alive. So that's the final build just there. Thank you very much if you did watch this video from start to finish. I know it's been a bit of a long one. Of course, this was all timestamped below anyway, as is usually the case. I really want to get a bit of a discussion going in our Discord channel and in the comments, so don't forget to join that server. Get in the YouTube comments, I'll respond to all of that. I want to see if you agree with these decisions, if you play these differently. Any great ideas out there, I'll absolutely get them up on the channel and credit you if I really think it is a viable option. So yeah, let's get talking in the comments. I will do my best to respond to every one of those, and until then, I will see you all in the next video. Peace.